Do you think it is more difficult for a woman to succeed in business than a man?
I think there can be obstacles in the way, but I do feel like the environment is definitely changing over time. We've had exceptional women that have come prior to us that have helped lay that foundation. But in whether you're a man or a woman, there's always going to be obstacles, perceptions that people have in the workplace. So I think there can be challenges. For me personally, being a very petite woman, most people assume or would not see me as influential or have power or a position of power because I'm little. And so sometimes it's not so much that just because I'm a woman, but because of my stature. And I'm sure that a small man would be perceived the same way. My other challenge is I don't look 53 years old. And so some people then won't perceive me as in that level of leadership because I don't necessarily like my age. That is changing as this camera is looking at me. So again, if that kind of answers your question, there are difficulties being a woman in leading an organization. Those stereotypes will probably always be there, but it's more in the perception of that person that is also have those stereotypes. But it's better.
Do you think there's anything that women can do to fix it?
I think...
or anybody do to fix it?
I think so, as we have more and more women going into top leadership roles that are the CEOs of companies, that will continue to help that cause. There's a great book called Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg.
It was on all of the top things that I did for my research.
Yes, so it's a great book. It gives insight onto the number of women that are in those CEO positions. It gives a lot of data. So we actually have a program called WOW, Women on the Way, and the first class of WOW, and it's for women 23 to 30 years old. We had them read that book. And so as professional, veteran women, meaning experienced women, I think it's important for us to help mentor and guide and encourage and coach young professional women to how to handle obstacles that they might have or perceive in the workplace, and how do we then have more CEOs in the future that are women.
Do you think it would have been different or easier, like getting to where you are if you were a guy or a man, or do you think it would have been just as?
I think for where I'm at, I'm in an industry that is actually becoming much more female driven than...
Well, I was looking at those business cards and there's like 2 of them were men.
Right. But if you look at CEOs in the chamber industry or even nonprofit management, which is really what this is considered, there are more and more women CEOs, or becoming much more women CEOs. Sorry, forgot to turn that one down. Than there are men. And so that's a plus for us. You do still see in the very, very large chambers more men, but every time now that there's been a changeover, even with our International Chamber Executives Association, the gentleman that had been there for years, he retired, and they brought in a female executive. So in nonprofit management, you are seeing more and more women CEOs now, and that's changed a lot in the last 10 years.
Do you think it's different for it being a nonprofit than regular business?
Not really, because we still run it as a business. It's just being a nonprofit is truly just a tax status. It's still very much a business, just like any other business.
Do you feel that social media is changing any stigma towards women?
I personally think, I'm probably not the one to ask a whole lot about social media. I do Facebook, and I do a little bit, but not all the time. I don't have time for it.
Yeah.
And most CEOs don't they have people who do it for their companies. They don't necessarily do it professionally. I mean, they might tweet just, like a little something just to keep stuff out there. I think social media and video alone in general actually, for a lot of things, has hurt women because of there are the way music videos and videos in general and the way that women dress sometimes, and I'm just don't help the cause of how women
showing everything.
Yes. So you take shows that are on TV that are very degrading to women, but yet you've got women out there doing that. Personally, that's just, I don't think social media just speeds up and allows more and more people to see that. I don't necessarily think that's the best thing, unless, if it's a professional woman doing her job in social and using social media to help, then that's great. But there's also the negative side and how it degrades not only women but men. I mean, when people do certain things and it's portrayed and shared on video or social media, I think it can actually be to the detriment of a group of population.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You're the first person who said that out of the question, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. Have you ever doubted yourself because you're a woman, or?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you doubt yourself for lots of reasons, and I think some of it is because we as women have that much more passionate side and caring and nurturing side. So I think it makes you play both sides of being that very driven corporate person, getting ahead, and then how do you balance that with being, the nurturing person, that the more female traits that come in that. So when you do that, then you doubt yourself because you're like, well, do I need to be this way or do I need to be this way? So you do. I mean, and I think anybody in a position of authority that has to make tough decisions will doubt themselves, whether you're a man or a woman. But I think there's probably more components that play into
woman.
Yeah. And I like to brainstorm things out. I like to have somebody that's my confidant that just lets me not only vent but also talk it out. And talking it out helps me process it to make a better decision. So I like to do pros and cons lists too.
Yeah, me too. There was one that popped in my head. I don't know if I wrote it down. And I forgot it. Do you think that women need to do anything more to succeed than men?
We have to do anything more. Sometimes I'm a little old school, but I think we have to work harder sometimes to get to the same level as men. Women also are not very good delegators. From what I've seen, I would rather do it all myself than delegate it to somebody on staff. Where I would perceive, this is my opinion, that most, a lot of men executives then have a very supportive person in charge that actually they delegate a lot of things to. But again, I think that's a little, just again being a multitasker and how women process information. That's probably why you see like all these stacks on my desk, because I've got my hands are in about 5 different things right now.
Do you think that younger generations are more accepting of women in the workplace?
Oh, I definitely. I don't think you're going to have the stereotypes and stigmas that my generation, or maybe even a little bit younger than myself. I think your generation is much more accepting of everyone than my generation. So whether it is, whether it's race or gender or, somebody's cultural backgrounds or, their nationality, however you want to say all of those things, your generation is much more accepting because our society's has become much more of a melting pot in the way terms of multicultural coming together than my generation was. And I've lived in Columbia County since I was 12. And so, back then, it was a very rural community. You could walk across Washington Road. I rode my horse across Washington Road. I rode my horse down Bel Air Road. And so it wasn't as a large of a population, but it was also very agriculture. You did not have a lot of professionals even at that time, but it was pretty much predominantly white Republican families, and I'm not saying that's a good thing or bad thing. That's just what it was. And now, of course, the population has changed, and that's a good. I mean, that is a good thing. But that's the generation you grew up in, and it's not the generation I grew up in. The good thing is you're going to be much more accepting to all of these things because you've grown up with it.
Was it weird, like everything changing, like seeing everything change if you've lived here without?
I embrace change and I embrace growth because I'm fine with it, long as there's challenges. There's positive growth and then there's challenges with growth. Right now our traffic and infrastructure can't keep up with it, but there is a plan in place. There are roads being pre-designed right now that people should know about because it's been in the news. It's available. They just don't know it's coming. So then they fuss about that. Why didn't y'all build roads if you knew everything was growing? It takes over 10 years to build a road. Yeah. As far as when you really look at buying the right of way, pre-design engineering, all the environmental studies that have to be done.
We were learning about that in my class today, actually.
Yeah, so all that has to be done way before you ever even think about turning one shovel of dirt. So that, but it's kind of back to your question. Growth and positive change is good. And again, it's nice that we have Belks that you could go to, things that are right around the corner for the products and services that we need. So it's good. Now, where the whole university complex on Bel Air Road is where my horse was boarded. There were 25 horses in a stable out there.
Really?
When I was in 8th and 9th grade.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So.
Are there any examples of being discriminated against or mistreated that you'd talk about?
I won't name names, but yes, there's been several times that I have been discriminated against in this position by elected officials, and just because I am a female in a leadership position for this organization. I can't give specifics, but it happens more than is really what this should be acceptable. But you also, again, you have to, if somebody is doing that and they discriminate against me because of the role I serve in here, you just try to turn the other cheek and not let it get under your skin and know that that person's wrong in their way, and they shouldn't look at this. They should look at the role that I play
in the work that you're doing,
and the work that the organization's doing that I'm helping lead. So, and I can give you kind of another example. So, met with an elected official the other day, myself and another same peer. We're in the room. He was male, I was female. Every time I went to speak, the elected official spoke over me. And every time the male counterpart spoke, the elected official listened to every word he said. And that happened just last week.
My mom was in a store the other day, and I don't remember what store she was at, but she was shopping, and this guy, she was going to buy a purse, and it was expensive. And she's the only one working right now. Her dad's in school, but the man asked if she had asked her husband first before she made the purchase. And my mom was like...
even not so much even in this role, but just as a female.